If you like what you watch, then don't forget to follow us on Facebook and Twitter for the latest updates on The More Show. Remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel for new weekly television and radio shows.
Hello and welcome to the show. I'm your host, Kevin Moore. Joining me on today's show are authors of Call Me When You Get to Heaven, sisters Jacky Newcomb and Madeline Richardson, founder of the British Youth Film Academy, Andrew Walkington, and author of Danny's Story, Diane Leroux and her son Willie. Stay tuned. My first guests are sisters Jacky Newcomb and Madeline Richardson. Now, Jacky, better known as the Angel Lady, is a best-selling author and paranormal expert. Her sister Madeline is a paranormal researcher and writer, and has provided psychic research to many popular magazines. Together, they have just written a fascinating account of a communication they had both with their father in the book Call Me When You Get to Heaven. Jacky and Madeline, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now, just to begin with, Jacky, what is an angel? Because that's a lot of your first work was based on that angel work, wasn't it?
Absolutely. Different things to different people. There's the traditional being that you would read about in, say, the Bible, for example. So something white and glowing with wings. A light being, sort of created by God to look after humankind. So that's the sort of the traditional angel. But lots of people see angels as their deceased loved ones. So their loved ones will appear to them in dreams and visions and say to them, don't worry about me, I've gone to a better place, but I'm your guardian angel now. So lots of people see their deceased loved ones as angels. So two different things, but I've written about both.
So can angels be, different things to different people then? And Madeline, what would you think of that?
Yes, I think they could. Traditionally, angels are the big sort of beings of light, Christmas card angels, that type of thing. But I think regularly people do think of their deceased family, their loved ones, as their angels who are looking out for them on the other side.
Yeah, because angels have appeared in all sorts of, different religions all throughout the centuries, haven't they?
And they appear in all different religions in different forms. So most religions believe in some sort of angelic being. But in my research, I've discovered that people who have no religious beliefs, no religious backgrounds, still have angel experiences. So believing in angels doesn't mean either way that you're more likely or less likely to have an experience.
Well, do you think that angels can intervene in certain situations then? I mean, even if you don't believe in angels, you could just dismiss the, what could have been an angel, but can they intervene?
Yeah, I say that occasionally. Mostly my work is about that. It's about people's real life experiences with angels, or what they call angels, what they believe to be angels. And people are saved by the roadside. Suddenly a mysterious stranger comes along, fixes the tyre, and disappears into the night. So that's a sort of, that's one type of experience where people will see a human type of angel that disappears. But then there are others where you're more likely to have these types of experiences and encounters if you're unconscious, say, for example, or during an illness or an accident, when you're in an altered state of consciousness. And then that's when people are more likely to actually see something or sense something. They feel somebody hold their hand and say to them, everything's going to be okay. Dreams, that's another one. We have most of our experiences in dreams.
Well, sometimes it can just be a voice. Perhaps you're driving and you might hear a voice saying, it's time to slow down. And as you turn the corner, there's an accident ahead, something like that, and people would say that would be an angelic experience.
But do you think that's what some people would just call the voice in my head? I mean, but you're calling it, you would say that's probably an angel experience, or at least some sort of spirit guide experience.
Yeah, that's what I would call it. If you want to call it gut instinct or intuition, I think, that you each have to call it what you feel that it is. But even that in itself is pretty miraculous, really, isn't it? Where did that voice come from? Where did that come from? Is that sort of higher aspect of yourself?
And would you say that children are more susceptible to see angels, or can children actually communicate with angels?
Our little ones have seen them, haven't they? Your son Sam, when he was a baby.
Well, he had experiences, that I interpreted as him seeing something in the room, very tiny, tiny baby, clearly engaging with something in the room that nobody else could see. And you also, your daughter had an experience,
my
didn't
eldest
she?
daughter, on the day of our grandmother's funeral, I hadn't spent any time with her during the day. A friend had looked after her. And then when we went back to the house, I thought, well, I need to spend a bit of time with her. And we sat in the middle of the floor with bricks, and we were just playing around with these little bricks. And she was just a toddler and couldn't speak many words, but suddenly looked up at the ceiling and said, "Look, Mummy, a fairy man." Well, I mean, what's a fairy man but a man with wings? And she didn't know what an angel was, but she'd seen something upon the ceiling that I hadn't seen. And it was just interesting that it was the day of my grandmother's funeral.
I mean, do you think that, for example, on the day of your grandmother's funeral, do you think she could have been with other people as well? You know, can angels be in multiple places?
Yes.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, they're not bound by the rules of time and space that we know it. I mean, they're interdimensional beings. I think you probably call
We
them.
touch on that in the book as well with spirits, where it reminded me of quantum physics, if you like, where something can be in more than one place at one time, which in itself is a bit mind-blowing.
Yeah, I mean, it takes a lot to get your head around that. I mean, it's
certainly
beyond
does.
our probably perception, isn't it, really,
Yeah.
on this plane. But how do you know, then, that you're being communicated to by an angel? What if it's some other sort of being? I mean, how would you know the difference? And are there any differences?
It's hard to know sometimes, isn't it?
I think it's your interpretation of that, and what I would call a spirit, a past loved one, somebody else might call their angel or their guardian angel. So it's something otherworldly, it's something that isn't sort of on this earth plane.
Usually it's a sense of feeling as well. People will say to me, I had this experience and it was an angel, and they say, well, I can't prove it to you. And if you say to them, how do you know? And they say, I just knew. So it's a sense, it's a feeling, it's about how it made you feel at the time, and the fact that often people are asking for help and then these things happen. So it's the response to request.
Right,
often.
so at your lowest point, whatever the situation may be, if you're crying out for help, then what you're saying is most times it's an angelic intervention that's happening, or at least something very spiritual that's going on.
Yes, I mean, if it feels positive, that's the key, really, if it feels positive.
I think one of the things we've learned is that asking for help is key, because they're not supposed to intervene.
Oh, is that right?
So if you ask for help, then that help hopefully would get granted. But if you don't ask, it's a fine balance between interfering in your life.
Yes, because I mean, you've still got to have that road of free will, haven't you?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And how would you know that the angel or spirit guides or whatever it is that's communicating with us at that time when we're at the lowest point, or whatever the situation may be? How do we know that's just not? How do we validate that that's our loved one coming through then? For example.
Lots of different ways.
Yeah, absolutely. Also proof example. Sometimes I've had proof of things that I didn't know about, had to go and find out and research, so therefore it wasn't coming from me because I had no idea. So then you find that out at a later date. That's one reason.
Oh, I mean, some of the stories that people have shared with me over the years have been amazing. Things like they were feeling low, and suddenly a photograph that was in a frame sitting on a mantelpiece would sort of lift up in the air over the top of an object and then land upright on the floor, for example. Those types of things, and you think, well, that doesn't happen by accident.
No, and indeed it doesn't. And do you think the signs up is there for you to make your mind up whether or not that was from, you know, a spirit or something else that's made that move, something move, or whatever the sign may be? It's up to you whether you want to take that on board as being a communication from the other side.
I think that's right, and I think oftentimes people do dismiss things that happen to them as, you know, I had this experience, but, you know, oh, it could have been this or it could have been that, or I had this dream, but didn't take it on board that maybe if you look a little deeper. And I think with the book, because individually you could say, well, is that coincidence? Collectively, as a body of evidence, it's very compelling.
Yeah, absolutely. Now your latest book, Call Me When You Get to Heaven, obviously you've never both written a book together before, have you?
No.
So just tell me about how that came about.
After you.
I'd already started to write stories about Dad's life because he'd been very poorly, had many illnesses, and often couldn't remember what had happened to him because he'd been in comas, had brain tumours. And I documented it for him and then would read him everything that had happened weeks at a time where he'd missed sections of his life. And he was always fascinated to hear about himself. And I kept all the writing and kept all the documents. And you'd always said to him, so when you do pass over, Dad, are you going to call us? Are you going to let us know that you've got safely to heaven? And he'd always say, of course I will, my darling. And on the night that he died, we did start to experience phenomena immediately, straight away.
Yeah, it was straight away. And you recognised the signs, did you?
Absolutely.
I think because we'd both researched it, we did sort of take note. And we said, as we met up on the night he died, perhaps this is his contact, this is what he wanted us to write about.
Well, just 2 weeks before he died, we'd actually said to him, will you come and help us write a book? Because before, this sort of 2 weeks beforehand, his late brother had appeared to all of his nieces, the 4 nieces, in dreams, and I'd written about them in my other books. So I'd sort of joked with Dad about it, will you come and help us write a book? And so it was like he'd given us permission. So when he started visiting in dreams and things straight away, then at that point I thought that maybe this is the book. But I couldn't face doing it alone.
No,
it was too much,
wasn't it?
Yeah, because we were grieving all the way through, and there were lots of tears. I mean, there was a lot of laughter, but there were lots of tears as well.
Isn't it?
And there still is. I mean, we kept that all in, and the tears. And I think it's difficult not to. If you're coming along the journey, if you're reading the book, you're on the journey with us, and you're going to feel the emotions that we felt as we went through, hopefully.
Well, I mean, obviously, it's written from the perspective to give healing to people that are going through the same situation, isn't it?
Absolutely.
That was the hope. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. And do you think, with both you having a very spiritual outlook on life, do you think you could have got through the passing of your father if you were just religious, for example?
I think it would have been much harder.
I agree.
Much harder. It really helped.
Why?
I think also before he died, he'd had an experience himself because he'd been in hospital for a procedure, only a week or so before he passed.
Yeah.
And he'd had his aunties come to him who'd passed. And he shared his experience with us, and we said, so I hope you told them you're not ready yet, Dad. Yeah, oh yes, I'm not ready to come yet. And he had one final fantastic weekend in London, and then he died. And I think because we felt they were coming to collect him, they were preparing and ready to come for him, that was a great comfort to both of us.
Yeah, absolutely. And do you think he knew his time was coming up? Do you think he sensed it?
He did. I mean, he had this sort of final operation, and the last thing he said to me just before he went to hospital is, he said, I've been really lucky. I've had all these illnesses, the brain tumour, the perforated ulcer, and I mean, his illnesses was a complete catalogue of experiences. And he said, it's got me this time. And I said to him, don't be daft, Dad. Of course you're fine. It's going to be okay. But he knew. Yeah. And that last time, before I took him into hospital before we went away for a weekend, he'd got a taxi booked to take him, and I'd actually had a panic in the night and just had a really strong feeling about it. And I phoned up and cancelled the taxi. And then in the morning, I turned up at the house, and my mum said to me, why are you here? I said, I'm taking him to the hospital. And she said, no, I've got a taxi. And I said, no, I've cancelled it. Well, she said, why? I said, I don't know. And I hugged him before we got in the car, and I didn't want to let go. And it was almost like on some level, I was being warned, this is the last time you'll get to hug him. And it was. And we'd been away for this weekend, we came back, and he'd been taken into hospital again. And I had a cold. And I mean, there's no way I was going to go and hug him then with his cold, because I mean, if he'd died at that point, I'd have felt to blame.
Yes.
So I'd been given this strong intuition, I guess that's all you could call it. So I'd been given the warning. So he knew. And I think on some level we also knew.
Well, okay. Well, I want to get more into the book after the ad break, because there's so much more to touch on yet. So stay tuned, and we'll be joined with Jacky and Madeline right after this short break.
Visit themoreshow.co.uk/shop to purchase products and services from your favourite past guests. If you're new to this site, you can also catch up on the previous television and radio shows through YouTube and the More Show website.
Welcome back. I'm still joined by authors Jacky Newcomb and Madeline Richardson. Now, we've been talking about your latest book, Call Me When You Get to Heaven. But a lot of the books sort of takes you back to your father's past, doesn't it, as well? Is there a reason for that in the book?
There is. I think because later on the phenomena that we experience, the dream visitations and things that happen to people in the family and to friends, wouldn't make sense to the reader unless they already knew about things that were important to him in his life.
Yeah.
For example, he was a great fisherman, and in one of the dream visitations he took somebody out on a boat and they went fishing together. And so we wanted to explain things that he was passionate about that then made sense of things that happened when he came back to us.
Yeah, because these experiences that happen weren't just sort of with yourselves, was it, when your father's come to visit people? You know, he's come to visit the whole family and friends, hasn't he?
Yeah, I mean, there were 20 people had experience after his passing. So, you know, if you were a bit cynical, you could say, well, they made that up. But there were people who were sort of old friends. One friend he hadn't seen, Mum and Dad hadn't seen for 10 years, that had an experience that met my mum coincidentally in a hospital, and said, oh, I had a strange dream type of experience. He said, it was so real, I told everybody about it. He said, and I cried because it felt so real to me. And of course it was. And it was only at that point my mum became alert and said, you need to speak to Jacky. But this man had no idea of the work that I do for a living. So that was a good one. I like that.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And, you know, when your dad passed, with you having done both the work that you've done, it didn't really shake your truth to the foundation, did it? I mean, you know, you didn't have to rethink, well, you know, has he gone back home or what? You were still quite content and happy that he'd moved on and he's back home.
I think that's true. I mean, we'd both researched the subject and covered the subject for 25 years plus. And I think that I had no doubt anyway, absolutely no doubt at all. If anything, it was extra confirmation, and this really is real, and look at all these experiences that we've had and people around us have had, and it just made it even more convincing and real.
Yeah, it's a very, very beautiful thing, isn't it? And do you think that we can all communicate with with someone that's just passed on? I mean, do we all have that ability, or do we all want to do that?
Yeah, I don't know that we all can, and I don't know that they can all come back. I think the most important thing is, you know, if the listeners want to try, it's important that you ask for some sort of sign that there is a continued existence. I mean, in the years that I've done research for many books, the deceased loved ones have come back in these dream visitations, so real experiences when the body's asleep. They've come back and they've brought us certain types of information, like, for example, they've said, you know, although I've come to you, I can't come and see your mother because she's not ready yet to see me. So I feel like there's some sort of universal law where they can't come back unless they're coming back to help us. If they're going to come back too soon and it's going to make things more difficult or worse, then they seem unable.
So how do you think it can help you if they do come through? Is that part of the grieving process, or?
It's definitely meant to be a comfort. Some people are too closed down in the beginning by grief to recognise any signs or anything like that. But I think it is possible, and I think when you're past the worst, and in fact it did happen in the book where for a long time Dad didn't come through to Mum, and right at the end, sort of 6 months on, he came through to Mum, sat on the end of her bed, woke her up in fact, and she spoke to him and said, oh, what are you doing here? Reached round to put the light on, and it had all gone, finished. But she knew it was him.
Yeah.
And he sat there, and I think she wasn't ready earlier than that. We were, maybe because of our belief system, maybe it was stronger with us, maybe is his wife, I don't know. She wasn't ready before then.
What did that do for her then, at that point?
At that point, it was a great comfort to her, and she was very excited by it.
Oh, she was thrilled.
Yeah.
Very excited by it. I think earlier on I wondered whether she'd had an experience, because she said she'd gone visiting friends, woken up in a strange bed, and thought for a moment, oh, he must be in the bathroom, and then remembered all over again that he'd died, and felt terrible sadness and grief. And I thought, I wonder if he had been with you, but because you are now so upset by it, he then left it again for a bit longer.
Yeah, and do you think that we can sometimes? I suppose it's like sensing when someone in the flesh is behind us. We just know they're there, don't we?
They're there, definitely.
And do you think it's the same feeling for when someone else has spirit is sort of moving.
Lots of people have had that experience where they're doing the ironing or the washing up, and they say, "Oh, I felt my deceased mother come and stand behind me." And how do you explain that so that somebody else would believe you?
Walk into your aura.
Yeah, you feel that touch in the same way that you might walk into a house and say, "Oh, I don't like the feel of this house," or you might say, "What a lovely feel, this house feels cosy," because we use our senses all the time. If somebody was looking if you were at a party and somebody across the room was looking at you, you turn around, you get a sense of that, you feel, because we use our sort of energy field, we use that all the time, and then we're not necessarily aware of that. So, yeah, sometimes it can be subtle, and other times, as some of the experiences we had, it's not so subtle.
Absolutely. So, just going back to the dreams, I mean, is that normally where contact can be made?
It's one of my favourite ones.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, over the years, I've heard all sorts of different things. And when you're asleep, your body's asleep, so you're not actually dreaming. You can be having an ordinary dream, and then all of a sudden, it can slide to one side or sort of fade out. And then a deceased loved one will sort of step through a door, walk through a light, and you become lucid and aware. So you know that your body's asleep. I've even heard myself snoring, which is quite funny. You know your body's asleep, but your mind is very aware, because when you see that deceased loved one, you're immediately confused. And one of the most common things that people say when they're asleep is, "Why are you here? I thought you were dead." So you know you are conscious of that on that level. So it's something we don't understand a lot of, but it's one of the more common ways to have afterlife communication. And of course, because your body's asleep, it's easy and safe. So when you wake up, if you're not ready to accept that, you can say, "It was just a dream and it's not frightening." If you are ready, you know. I mean, people have these experiences and 20 years later, they're still clear and vivid. And you don't remember dreams normally. No. But with these, you don't forget.
Not like that, that's right. And I mean, what about the opposite angle of asking yourself, what about going to see a psychic? I mean, is that just another way of communicating with them?
Just another way of communicating. I always think, why would you go to a third party if you can have that experience directly? And I think sometimes for some people that's the only way they're going to have that experience, and I think there are psychics and mediums out there that perform a brilliant job. But for me, my experiences have always come personally. So it would always, you don't want somebody sitting in the middle saying, can you just tell me what he said? And then you're passing the message backwards and forwards. And in a dream visitation experience, they can come direct.
Well, do you think that's because we're scared of our own abilities, of what we can ultimately do?
Possibly, but sometimes people don't seem to be able to have these experiences. I mean, we literally, one of my sisters had a dream experience where my father-in-law came to my sister in a dream. And she said to him, while she was asleep, she said, "No offence, but why have you come to visit me?" And he said, "Because John, my husband, sleeps on another level. So he sleeps in a sort of very deep, whatever that level is, whatever that means, and so that he wasn't able to reach him." So sometimes it's because of the way we sleep. So sometimes it's to do with us, that we're unable to receive the communication. So that's where a psychic is very useful indeed.
So then, as it says in the book, death is just the beginning, isn't it, Madeline?
It is just the beginning, definitely. I think we visit Earth, I think we visit this plane, if you like, many times. I think we come, we learn lessons, and we do it over and over and over again.
Well, for what purpose?
We're continually learning. I think love and knowledge are the most important things that there are. And I think when we get it right, we end our journey, if you like. We go back to the source.
And do you think we get it right?
I think some people get it right quicker than others.
Yeah. So we're all at different levels, do you think?
I think we are, and I think some people are new souls and some people are very old souls. Some people have had many lifetimes and some have only had a few.
I don't seem to be any judgment on that, though, does there? Certainly with the experiences that I've had where there isn't a problem. It's like, you wouldn't look at a child at infant school and you wouldn't think of them any differently than you would somebody who was at college, for example. They're just at a different stage of learning, and that's okay.
Yeah. And there's, as you say, everything's perfect. Okay, so the book's out now. What's your hope for the book?
Well, I think the most important hope that we have is that people who are also grieving gain comfort from it, because if they have been unlucky enough to have no experience at this stage, sometimes when people read the books, they say they then had an experience afterwards, almost as if reading about the phenomena takes the fear away and then opens them up to be able to receive their own experiences. So I hope that, for the people that want that experience, I hope that. But also I hope that the book brings comfort to other people who are going through the process to know that there is something else, and we believe that without a shadow of a doubt.
Absolutely. And where can you get the book from, Madeline?
All major bookstores, and it's also available on the internet, and it's available on Jacky's website through signed copies.
Right, so they can go straight to you and get it all
They
through all the
can,
major bookstores.
absolutely
Well, that's
can.
wonderful. Well, look, thank you both so much for joining me. It's been an absolute honour and a pleasure to have you on.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
For more information on the book, visit my website, themoreshow.co.uk. Stay tuned, as after the break, we'll be joined by the founder of the British Youth Film Academy, Andrew Wilkinson.
If you like what you watch, then don't forget to follow us on Facebook and Twitter for the latest updates on The More Show. Remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel for new weekly television and radio shows.